starting with board members, subcommittee members.
Good morning, this is Tia Latrell McCormick.
Good morning, this is Board Member Harris.
Perfect, and now staff, please.
Gary Landry, Executive Director, here.
Adam Higginbotham, Deputy Executive Director.
Leah Easter, Chief Compliance Officer.
Lisa Nguyen, Compliance Specialist.
Maggie Adams, Compliance Specialist.
Douglas, Board Member here.
David Scarpelli, Inspector.
Michelle Fanning, Inspector.
Perfect. Thank you. The mission statement. The mission of the Nevada State Board of Cosmetology is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of those that obtain cosmetology-related services through the delivery of the quality testing, licensing, inspection, and education services that focus on consumer protection. We'll now take comments from the general public. Let's please try to limit those to 3 minutes. Thank you. Is there any public comment at this time? Okay, moving forward on to Section D, Law Review Subcommittee Approval for Previous Meeting Minutes for discussion. May I please have approval for the minutes for the last minutes of the last subcommittee for October 26th of 2020. I would like to have a vote for that, please.
This is Board Member McCormick. I'd like to make a motion to approve the meetings from our last board meeting on October. Wait, I'm sorry. See, what was the date again, Kai? The exact date? I'm trying to look it up.
It's okay. October 26th of 2020.
October 26, 2020.
May I please have a second?
Board Member Harris, I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Next on the agenda. Hold off 1 second. I apologize. My computer scrolled up on me. Okay. May I please have the presentation for aesthetic license, consumer risk for, and we will be up for discussion. The board will hear a presentation from Matt and a presentation from Nima at this time on aesthetic licenses on the Nevada BOC.
Madam Chair, this is a two-part presentation, and Matt will follow up after my presentation, if that's okay.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you for clarification.
I'll go ahead and share my screen. One moment. Okay, hopefully my screen is shared now. Good morning, members of the board. For the record, my name is Adam Higginbotham, Deputy Executive Director. This agenda has two presentations. For the first presentation, I'll provide a brief overview on states with two-tiered licenses for aesthetics, the aesthetic scope of practice, the real and expected licensure growth, and the importance that we ensure consumer protection is accomplished should the board explore legislative changes to increase the aesthetic scope of practice through advanced services. The second presentation is by Matt Britton from NEMA. He'll provide an industry perspective on the growth of aesthetics and the potential service expansions. He will also explain in more detail how a two-tiered licensing structure might look like in Nevada, having participated in a market that currently has a two-tiered licensing structure. So again, my presentation will focus on the following items: the states with two-tiered license, aesthetics scope of practice and the growth, along with identifying risks and advanced services should the board go that path. Currently, there are 5 jurisdictions identified that have two-tiered licenses for the aesthetics program: Washington, D.C., Minnesota, Utah, Virginia, and Washington State. There are some states like Arizona and Mississippi that currently have aesthetic scopes of practice that exceed Nevada's current scope of practice. And when I surveyed a few other states to see if there were states interested in expanding, there were other states that have tried, like California, to develop a two-tiered licensing system for aesthetics, but they were unable to pass the bill in the legislature due to the medical associations in those states. Regardless of how the board wishes to proceed or expand upon the aesthetics program, it is important to note that during the third quarter of 2020, aesthetics surpassed cosmetology for new licenses issued in the state of Nevada. In July, August, and September months of 2020, we licensed 376 new estheticians to 351 new cosmetologists. This is the first time that another program has surpassed cosmetology in numbers. The aesthetics increase was expected based on the growing licensed aesthetics professionals in Nevada, along with the job outlook growth for skincare specialists from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, skincare specialists are expected to grow by 17% until 2029. The aesthetics profession is growing both in numbers and scopes of practice in some states. Currently in Nevada, the scope of practice for an esthetician is the following. 1, beautifying, massaging, cleansing, or stimulating the skin of the human body for the use of cosmetic preparations, antiseptics, tonics, lotions, creams, or any device, electrical or otherwise, for the care of the skin. This consists of services like facials, microdermabrasions, and other similar services. Scope 2, applying cosmetics or eyelashes to any person, tinting eyelashes or eyebrows, and lightening of the hair of the body. This consists of services such as lash extensions, lash perming, and similar services. Then the third scope is removing hair of the body of any person with the use of depilatories, waxing, tweezers, or sugaring. And this consists of services like sugaring, waxing, and those similar services. So as we look at the basic skincare services that we've currently reviewed, we've reviewed basic facial, eyelash extension, hair removal, and makeup service, which are all under the current scope of practice for an esthetician. And all 3 risk types were identified in these services, all 3 infection risks, malpractice, safety risks, and the product reaction risks. And some of our riskier beauty-related services that we identified were found in the skincare-related services. The potential for consumer risks for basic skincare services are listed on the screen. I'm not going to try to pronounce all of them because some of them are quite difficult for me. But I'll stress that all beauty-related services require some consumer risks. Those consumer risks increase if a service provider is not properly trained with practical and theoretical knowledge. As we look at the consumer risks for basic services, it's important that we are mindful when considering potential service expansion for a 2-tiered aesthetics license that also increases the scope of practice, which may increase the risk to the consumer. In order to mitigate the consumer risk, should the board attempt to expand upon the scope of practice, the board would need to explore the potential services to be added. the curriculum to teach those added services, while the board staff would need to learn the equipment and products used in these services and identify the potential infection, malpractice, safety, and product reaction risks, so the agency can maintain a level of consumer protection focus. This is a list of the potential services for advanced aesthetics. This is just, I guess, a possible list. And I won't go into the details concerning the services because the next presentation will go into better detail. This slide is only to communicate the possible services that the board could look to add to another license should they attempt to add it. And from those services that you all just saw, we are already fielding complaints and inquiries about the advanced services and aesthetics, and we've been fielding these calls for years. The volume of increase could be increasing because Arizona, Utah, and Oregon, all neighboring states, they have scopes of practice for aesthetics that exceed Nevada's scope of practice. We also are getting these calls because it could be the increasing market demand of these services. Regardless for why we're getting these calls, for the past two years, we've received over 50 inquiries or complaints from consumers regarding these services that we do not regulate and that are not really regulated by any board or government entity. It's possible that the Nevada State Board of Cosmetology may be that agency to deliver consumer protection in these gray area services that do not offer any recourse for consumers at the current administrative level. In closing, if the board votes to proceed with attempting to expand the scopes of practice for aesthetics through a two-tiered licensing system, then our agency's knowledge base for those services would also need to be expanded upon to ensure that we're accomplishing our legislative mandate, which is consumer protection. And we are ready for however the board wishes to proceed. I can answer questions after the next presentation because Matt's presentation is a little bit more, is more detailed from the industry's perspective and probably will answer some of the questions that may be generated from my presentation. So Madam Chair, with your permission, I'd like to turn it over to Matt Britton for his presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hiddenbottom. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adam. This is Matt Brinton, one of the founders and the CEO of the National Institute of Modern Aesthetics, or NEMA is the acronym. Let me here start my video. Hello, everybody. Hey, thank you all for allowing me to attend here. So board members and members of the public, I'm really excited to be here today to present. And Adam did an excellent job of kind of laying the groundwork here. I will, let me see if I can share my screen here and bring up the presentation. Okay. Okay, does that come up okay?
Yes, perfect, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, and this is something I'm really passionate about. This is something that I've been working on for a long time. Actually, my wife and I have been in this industry for about 16 years. We started with medical spas that we started in the state of Utah 16 years ago. And the jump into owning an aesthetic school really came out of a need. We just weren't seeing training in the areas where we were hiring and where we were seeing the greatest growth. And that was, so it was in 2008 or so when we decided we really needed to create our own school that provided the training we needed for our busy medical spas and where we saw most of the growth happening. And so that's why we jumped into aesthetic training and education. And at that time, we were fortunate in the state of Utah to already have this second tier license that I'm going to talk more about today. Utah was the first state to legislate for this second tier, higher tier license. I believe it was 2001. But as we were going along and operating our medical spas, we noticed even the students that were graduating from the local schools where they had the advanced license, still didn't have training in a lot of the medical device technologies that were really emerging at the time. And when I say that, I'm talking about things like laser hair removal, laser skin rejuvenation, those types of procedures. And we'll talk more about those. But that's really why we jumped into the space. And in the subsequent time in 2012, Utah enacted sweeping legislation that really addressed this emerging industry of medical aesthetics, and really put the regulations around and the licensing around who can operate these devices and under what terms of supervision by medical professionals. And I think now we are 8 years past that date. There's been some tinkering, but that legislation, the framework largely stands today. And it's been an amazing thing to see what's happened in our industry as we have been able to, we and other schools have been able to really focus on the training where we're seeing so much of the growth. So that's just my background. I can jump into this. I know Adam already laid some great groundwork here, and I know there's another presentation after this where we'll talk more about specific the Utah legislation. So I can go through some of this pretty quickly, but basically at the end of this, I would just like to, hopefully we've hit on the points where we need to understand what this two-tier license system is and why it's needed, and why now is a great time to look at this. And so I'll go through and talk about the elements of it's sometimes called a master aesthetic license or advanced. I think I'll use advanced the most. And then I'll define the differences and then where you cross over into medical aesthetics, which is a term that doesn't apply in Nevada. And actually most states are not using this as any kind of a professional designation, but it's a designation that the industry is using to define the use of these medical-based devices by estheticians. And at the end, my favorite part is talking about the benefits of this advanced license, and that's exciting. It's really my favorite part of any presentation where I talk about what we can see here in terms of growth opportunities for our state. So jumping right into this, Adam did a great job talking about the current state of the aesthetic license here in Nevada. And I really have a lot of information on this. I'll just do it quickly to just really underscore. There's a number of studies have been promoted that have talked about where we're seeing growth in this industry. And we're talking about this industry, it's the beautification industry and anti-aging industry. And so in this study that I'm referring to here on this slide, the company surveyed the major players in the industry. And if you can see the bottom bullet point, we're talking about Allergan and Galderma, MERS, major players in the dermal injections industry, but then also the major laser manufacturers. And there's a lot of optimism about growth. And after this survey, this study shows a projected doubling of this industry within the next 5 or 6 years, which is pretty staggering. And it's basically about a 12% annual growth. And so this is an amazing opportunity, amazing time for Nevada to look at this section of the industry and really say, well, do we have the licensing and the training needed for the employees who will be out there offering these services? And at the moment, I think we can say that the state of the regulatory environment in Nevada is a no there. And I think this is why this is such a great opportunity. Even within surgical practices, dermatology offices, this is from a survey of the plastic surgeons. Even within those offices where they are providing things like dermal fillers and Botox injections, a major segment of the growth opportunity is services like chemical pills and laser hair removal and IPL, all kinds of laser treatments where they're seeing tremendous growth opportunities. And interestingly enough, here in the West where we are, we're based in Utah and in Nevada there, the highest per capita use of these services is in the West by quite a margin, that region 5. So any growth trends we're seeing nationwide apply even more to our state. And so when we talk about where we're seeing all the growth in the industry, back to the issue is that if the growth is happening here, if this is what consumers are really demanding and wanting, the problem comes where these services being provided in this advanced industry are not currently licensed and not currently regulated in a way that provides any kind of clarity. When I go speak with different practices in the state, medical spa owners, physicians, I find all kinds of misconceptions and all kinds of different understandings as to who's allowed to operate which devices under what terms, what does supervision mean? And that's really, I feel, a problem for primarily consumer safety when there's no guarantee that any particular practitioner has had any training in these services that are being provided. And to be clear, these really are FDA regulated medical devices that are being used in most cases to perform things like laser hair removal and laser skin rejuvenation, the laser vein removal, skin tightening. I'll get into more of these devices, but where these are all happening in medical spas, in laser centers, in physicians' offices, and the actual technicians really have no credentialing, it's very difficult to, even as Adam has pointed out, ascertain, well, are there problems? Are they happening? There's no reporting mechanism, no oversight board. And we're really kind of relying on individual practices to make sure that the practitioners are safe and properly supervised. So this is an issue that we feel is really a consumer safety issue primarily, but it's even beyond that because there's just a lot of confusion too. I know businesses that are either unwilling to expand in the state or come to the state where there isn't a regulatory framework around this, too much clarity, and that's something that we think is inhibiting business opportunities. And then you go into the next steps where the consumers aren't receiving the best possible treatments they can receive. And so there's probably a bit of a dampening of opportunity and opportunities for growth where licensee or the practitioners are not trained properly and understand the possibilities, where the difference occurs if you have an educated esthetician or laser technician who understands the possibilities, understands the treatment protocols. You see an elevated consumer satisfaction and growth in the industry. So there are a number of reasons we can talk about the immediate challenges here. And this two-tier license system is what really addresses this, where currently we have the basic license, is what we call it in Utah, or more states that don't have a two-tier license, it's simply called the aesthetic license. It's usually about a 600-hour license, most states. The advanced license comes along, it's typically adding an additional 600 hours on top of that, and it builds on the basic license. That's what's great about it. It's a perfect building block to stack on top. And we're really just intuitively, of course, we understand we're just getting into the more advanced procedures and expanding the scope of practice. In Utah, that's, I know what we're going to talk about today. The requirements for the education vary from state to state, but typically it's, again, these additional 600 hours for a total of 1,200 hours. It's important to note that there are different segments that I'm going to touch on next, and I'll break it down so we understand what we're talking about as we get into the advanced license. But most states, of course, allow a portion of practical and a portion of theory, just like with the basic licenses. Practical is still, of course, a very important part of it. And with this, if we do consider a two-tier or moving to an advanced license, we know that there will be a lot of questions that come from existing licensees about, well, what happens with me now that I've already attended school? And they may be out in practice actually using laser devices and performing a lot of these procedures. And so a pathway to grandfathering is something that most states are looking at as they enact this legislation, so that there is an opportunity for existing licensees. Maybe it's a shortened education program, or maybe it's some sort of verification process that allows these existing licensees to obtain their master license. And we can talk more about this. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions about this. And as we go further, I think this last bullet point, what happens with this advanced license is we are talking about authorizing master estheticians or advanced estheticians to use FDA regulated medical devices. And so there is an intersection with the medical world and with medical professionals. And so this is a really critical part of the discussion is how to work with medical professionals and under what terms, what kind of regulatory environment, what types of supervision, and we'll dive into that as well. So as I mentioned, the advanced license is equal parts theory and practical. And we talk about practical, we're going to break it down in our minds, we break it down into three different segments. Once we talk about the advanced license, we talk about a way for us to understand it better. This is not something the industry has necessarily adopted, but we talk about advanced aesthetics being getting into things like performing chemical peels and dermaplane, permanent cosmetics. That's something in Utah. In Nevada, it's regulated separately under the health departments, county health departments. But microblading, lymphatic drainage, lymphatic massage. These are treatments where we're not using devices as much as we are, or power-assisted devices. These are typically chemicals. And we refer these as advanced aesthetic treatments, excuse me. And then, excuse me, we have advanced device-based treatments where now we're talking about devices that are power-assisted, but not necessarily FDA regulated. And we're getting into treatments like microneedling, microdermabrasion, power-assisted facials, hydrofacial and diamond glow are two really popular industry leading brands, LED devices, and those types of devices. And then the third category where I think I want to spend most of the time is talking about the FDA regulated medical devices, where the advanced license would include the ability of practitioners, these advanced estheticians, to perform procedures like laser hair removal, laser skin rejuvenation, skin lightening. With lasers, there are all kinds of amazing treatments that can occur depending on the wavelength and depending on how the laser is calibrated. Everything from removing, excuse me, unwanted hair to removing veins, skin tightening, skin lightening. And then we get into, that's just the laser world. You get into technologies like intense pulse light for photofacials to reverse sun damage. And then there are all kinds of other FDA regulated devices that take advantage of technologies like radio frequency that's used for lipolysis, that's destroying fat under the skin, and skin tightening. Ultrasound for the same thing. Cryotherapy for freezing fat. You probably have heard of Cool Sculpting is the most popular brand for cryotherapy. Plasma devices for skin rejuvenation. There's electromagnetic devices. M-Sculpt is a popular brand where this is rapid muscle stimulation, combining these with radio frequency for lipolysis and for skin tightening and toning. There's no end to the kinds of technologies, the types of technologies, and what these technologies can do that stop short of plastic surgery or actually invasive procedures. So all of these are non-invasive, and the typical term is used as minimally disruptive. I know that's kind of a loaded term in a way, and how you draw lines between disruptive and minimally disruptive, but that's where most states are drawing the boundaries and allowing these advanced licensees to operate these devices. And Adam mentioned the states where we're seeing this already. Here's where this is happening and either already passed or legislation is pending. Most states are referring to these as master aesthetic licenses or advanced aesthetic licenses. But this is something I think we'll see sweeping across the nation as more and more states take a look and see what's happening and understand what's happening in the market. Some states have chosen to go the way of a laser technician license, like Arizona and Texas. And we feel that's a mistake because we feel that the aesthetics is the right path, the right avenue to go to add the laser technician certification, where a properly trained advanced esthetician would not only be able to use the laser technologies, but also these other advanced aesthetic technologies like chemical peels, microneedling, and have a full array of tools to address a customer, a client's needs, instead of just being able to use lasers. So we really don't see that trend for laser technician certification going the same direction as this master advanced license wave is going. So as we get into these three different areas, it's really defining where these boundaries occur. And the boundary between the basic aesthetics and advanced aesthetics, the states are making these clear determinations. And Nevada has a great structure for the current aesthetic license. And so creating the regulatory structure around the advanced license is something that I would love to be involved in the discussions there and where things, how things go forward. As we get into the medical aesthetic world, the FDA has really defined how we deal with medical technologies. And without belaboring this too much and getting too much into too much detail, these medical devices, once they are intended to affect the structure or function of the body, they're regulated by the FDA. And so that's where these devices that are being used for these services I talked about before are really requiring some level of medical supervision and medical direction because they are regulated by the FDA. And so what most states are doing, including Utah, is creating and how we actually intersect with the medical world is typically states are requiring that any practice that offers these procedures has a medical director, usually an MD or a DO that oversees the entire operation. And then the real area where there's a lot of, really needs to be a lot of work is defining what types of supervision is needed based on the procedure being provided. And these supervisory services are generally offered by mid-level practitioners like physician assistants or nurse practitioners who still can prescribe, but are generally more available to be on site supervising. And then at the base is the medical intake consultation, where as a client comes in, again, because these are medical devices being used for the most part, a full medical history is needed to be taken. And so a lot of states are requiring some form of medical intake consultation. And again, generally with physicians or nurse practitioners or physician assistants. And this is really an important part of how this practice is, the oversight occurs. So the discussions with medical professionals are really critical. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that we see is that the kind of the knee-jerk reaction when anyone hears about an advanced license and how it intersects with these medical devices is they think that we are trying to take something away. But that's not what it is. I think the more opportunity we have to discuss this with the medical professionals, we see as we really need to work together. We need medical direction and supervision in order to make this work. And in states where they are working together on this, we are coming up with solutions. And it seems to be working where the medical professionals feel that they are involved enough to make sure that they have the right oversight. And it's important for consumer safety. It's also important for insurance. Being able to insure these practices and have the proper insurance regulation to make sure that businesses are protected and consumers protected is important. So again, this intersection with the medical world is a really critical piece. So the benefits, I love this stuff and I can talk way too long about it, but I'll just be really quick here. And I know this is something that we'll probably have a lot more opportunity to talk about. But I can just say, because we've been in this business for as long as we have, and we've been involved in multiple states providing training, this is a big consumer safety issue and a big consumer safety improvement once we have trained practitioners. Just so we all understand, you could take the world's best dermatologist or plastic surgeon, and they're busy doing what they do, and we may have a laser hair removal device in that dermatologist's office or plastic surgeon's office. And if we have an untrained technician operating that laser hair removal device, even if the dermatologist or plastic surgeon saw the patient on the intake, prescribed the proper settings, if the laser technician goes
You
in
got the new one?
and misses
You
a
put the
setting
old one in
somehow,
there? Just
then-
dump it in there.
then there's all kinds of opportunity for damage, for harm to be done, even with the world's best physician overseeing the service. And so to not have a trained technician is really a problem for consumer safety, even with the best medical supervision. So it's really important that we train our laser technicians and estheticians. And when we do that, we increase the public safety. We also have better outcomes. We have practitioners who are trained and understand what they're doing. And that's good for everyone. We have more consistent outcomes. And when you have happy consumers who aren't injured, but they're actually getting good treatments, they go out, they tell their friends, their family, and we see tremendous industry growth, which I can't understate enough. Where we see this advanced license, we see tremendous industry growth. And then Adam touched on this, but by licensing this segment of the business, we will have access to data, to trends, to bad outcomes, and all kinds of information where we really don't have the full picture right now without any sort of regulatory environment. So I touched on industry growth, more investment in these types of technologies. We'll see business growth, we'll see business opportunities, and especially for physicians who, understanding the regulatory environment, will feel comfortable hiring trained technicians to develop or even add these services to their practices. And in terms of specific opportunities for licensees, this really is where I get the most excited, because these types of positions, this type of training with a master or advanced esthetician credential, our graduates are seeing excellent jobs, high-paying jobs, stable jobs, not just, and really the word I use is careers. They're finding careers in physicians' offices, in medical spas, in laser centers, for device manufacturers. And these are positions where they're more likely to have stable hours, salaries, 401k, paid time off, health plans, versus booth rent type positions that a lot of basic aesthetics deals with. So there are huge potential possibilities for expansion for individuals and for the industry and for the public as a whole by passing this or enacting this second tier. And this is something, my favorite part of this really comes down to these slides here. We talk about pay. And this is from the US Department of Labor, 2019. Now these are the median incomes for skincare professionals. And so this is looking at annual pay for all types of skin professionals, from basic estheticians all the way through advanced estheticians and laser technicians. The telling part of this is on the right side, as we see the states that actually have this more advanced license. And some of these states are pretty new to the license, but really looking at a state like Salt Lake City, there's really no reason that a median income for this broad category should be higher than Las Vegas or Los Angeles or San Francisco. And where pay is generally lower in our state, it actually far exceeds these other states where they don't have the advanced license. And if we look at particularly our business, our medical spas, we have over 100 employees, many of whom are master estheticians. Our pay, our median pay for our estheticians is more similar to the pay in Seattle, and we're in Utah. And so when I'm talking about opportunities for careers, for real, stable, and career type opportunities, that's really what I'm referring to. This kind of pay, we also offer benefits, 401k plan with matching, we offer health plan, and that's what we have to do to keep talent, because that's what the market is demanding. And so I see, as things go forward, I see this disparity growing even further. And again, if this is diluted because these numbers are showing you the median pay of all licensees, if we were to separate this out to just show master or advanced estheticians, you'd see an even bigger jump. But I think that really brings the point home, and we're excited about the next steps on this. In this 2021 session, I think this is a great opportunity. If it's something that if there's a sort of a reluctance to move forward because there's an intimidation factor or a fear that we can't work things out with the medical professionals, I just want to say that anything can be worked through. I feel that this is an opportunity here where we really shouldn't let this pass, because if we don't, then we're looking at 2023 and beyond. I know this will eventually happen, and we feel like the time is now. We'd love to be involved as much as we can in the process. We feel like there's so many reasons to do this now. And that's sort of the end of my presentation. I would love to handle any questions that you may have. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Matt, for that information. It was very detailed. I do appreciate all of everything from Adam as well. All of the information was extremely needed. Thank you. Leah, I have a question.
Sure.
On the call. Okay. So there's a lot of parts to this question. I'm trying to simplify it so I don't confuse myself trying to ask the question.
No worries.
So we have, in the beginning, probably about 2 years ago, we talked about the licenses hours were at 900. We lowered the hours for 600 here recently to accommodate the information for the curriculum required that is already broken down in hours for the esthetician program.
Right.
So it sounds like to me they're asking, we would have to view it as adding more the scope of aesthetics, and I do mean not an extensive list. For example, whether it's 2023 or 2050, I don't think any medical facility would ever approve an esthetician without a nursing license and they should not be going underneath the third layer of the skin for injections or otherwise. So I know injecting Botox, et cetera, is out. There's a couple of other things that are concerning regarding medical, but if we are just talking about a scope that we can, a reasonable scope to extend the esthetician program, my concern is we just lowered those hours to accommodate within that time frame of, instead of 900, 600. That was a big jump just recently. How does that look? And pressure-wise, my biggest concern would be to merge all that information within a 600-hour program. And then my other concern would be, we're talking about it sounds like we're talking about two different things a little bit. There's a 2-tier license, yes, absolutely, we're familiar with. And then there's another one that is a master aesthetics. We would have to look at a different licensing for that. It sounds like, and not an additive. So for example, if I took the basic aesthetic program, that's the 600-hour program versus taking a 1200-hour program for a master aesthetics. But that can always be adjusted accordingly, according to what the board votes on. I guess I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah,
okay.
No, I think you're bringing up great points, and I'm glad Matt's on the call, because the only real, I would say, experience or knowledge I have in this is looking over some of Utah's laws, which are included in your last 2 pages of board pack for anyone looking online. And you're correct. I believe the way Utah has it, it's 2 totally separate licenses basic is 600 and master, I believe, is 1,200 unless something changed in the time that I pulled this information. So you're correct that they're treated like two different things. I don't know what the process is. So say, for example, someone like Tia Luttrell, who's a licensed esthetician in Nevada, if she wanted to move and get a license to be a master esthetician in Nevada, would she just pick up 600 hours in that advanced training, or does that require something different on her part? But you're right, I think, in saying that it's not like you would be waived into being a master. I would imagine you would be completing whatever chunk of training that you didn't get from your basic aesthetic program. I don't know if Matt has some more information on that, but that's kind of how I was reading Utah's requirements, but I could be mistaken.
Exactly
Okay.
right. Yeah, two
Thank you.
separate licenses, a basic license and a master license. Some students only want the basic license and stop there and go and finish and go on with their careers, and others move on for the master license. So each license is 600 hours, a total of 1,200 hours for both.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. Leah, my other question would be, so I'm trying to simplify this in my head so that I can present this accordingly, because
I have to simplify, Kai, so don't feel bad.
My head hurts. So I do, okay, let me say it like this. How I can view things is, right now, for example, if you have an instructor aesthetics license and your regular aesthetic license, of course, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I would like, okay, here's what I'm trying to do. If I can take say, if you can relate, etc., what you're doing, so that would be considered instructor. Can we merge that together and highlight that as a master, but not put that on the license, but you can utilize that term. So all other classes that fall under that with education. So when you go into a facility that allows aesthetic practices within the scope of aesthetics under a physician, and they also have an instructor's license to support that as well, that's something we could possibly look at that doesn't require large adjustment.
I see what you're saying, and I don't know if that's down the road. Maybe we're even talking about 3 different terms. Like, for example, someone like, let's say I graduated from the program, I'm an esthetician. If I become an instructor and have some showing of advanced training, maybe we adopt and outline what constitutes a master esthetician. And then perhaps if you go and do a program like Utah offers, then that's a 3rd title called advanced esthetician. I mean, I don't know if that becomes too cumbersome, or, I know the titles are important to a lot of people, you know what I mean? And I know that being an instructor or just being licensed over the years, people get a lot of advanced training. What I think Utah does well, which is something to modify or to model after, is they're very specific about what every definition is. Do you know what I mean? So if we do pick up master SD or advanced SD, I think it's important that the board outlines what specifically you did, because for you, you could be in the industry and you said, I have taken the top of the top CEU, I feel like I am now a master esthetician. And I might say, okay, but I did 600 extra hours in Utah, so I think I'm a master. So I think whatever we do, it's just important that the board kind of has that criteria for what constitutes master or medical esthetician, that sort of thing. And I think that's a hard question to ask and answer in one setting. I think that's probably why we don't have one right now. But I mean, I can tell you that the staff is certainly open to doing it that way. And I think something else that Utah did well is you can kind of read their laws and understand what aesthetic services you can do with what license. That's a real head scratcher here. There's some new aesthetic tool every day I'm asked about, And even after doing like tons of research on it, I still don't totally get what it does. And it certainly isn't in our law what it does. So I think a step for this board and this subcommittee too, if you want to move forward, is to really let's start coming up with like lists of things that we can get knowledge on and we can actually put in our law, so that you all and other licensees can say, okay, this is specifically in here, my license allows me to do this. Because that's really lacking right now. And I think it's a challenge for all of our licensees.
Okay, that makes sense. Does it? Now, what if we took an eclectic approach? Because cosmetology is an art. The definition, aesthetics as well, is an art and science merged together. So what if we took an eclectic approach by saying, okay, an instructor, in order to even, you can't even keep your instructor's license unless you have 30 CEU credits already, right? So because there is ongoing substantiated information that is required to even renew that license, that, like you said, is forever changing the knowledge and education, and that's why it's required for us to stay on top of that accordingly. How I guess that would be upon, now would you say that would be upon the board interpretation of their point of view, or that's something that would have to be, I guess we, just like what you said, we'd have to list it out. That's the same thing I'm saying in general. It's all about how they're the point of view, the interpretation of. So I guess we can simplify that and doing the interpretation of, which the board would have to determine if they want a separate license or not. So that's how it would have to be presented, I guess. And I just want to be very clear, however. So Leah, here's another question I have regarding the medical board. I don't think anyone's scared. Let's be clear. No one's scared about any board. What we are is respectful. And what we will be is respectful of the career that everyone has worked hard to be in. So I do not want to dictate what the medical board will do and what they should do and what they ought to do. Right. What I will, however, is create a suggestion on I would actually, not a suggestion, I would like to know, how is the physicians utilizing estheticians? Are they already utilizing estheticians doing certain services? Because then that would be a conversation we can bring to the medical board that would be supported. If estheticians are already used by plastic surgeons, tag team with on the same, certain facials, etc., with licensed nursing, then yes, then that's something we can have a conversation and bring to the table. But I guess the first thing would be, what does the medical board acknowledge that aesthetics do right now that is okay under a physician's license? Right. So right now, it's, to be honest, it's pretty basic, right? Like if you're maybe a plastic surgeon or you're a dermatology office, you're probably hiring our estheticians to do basic services, the basic facial, maybe microdermabrasion, that sort of thing. I can tell you that I've gotten quite a few calls from medical professionals saying, what can I supervise your esthetician to do? Because I want them to do more under my guidance. Now, what more consists of, I'm not 100% sure, but they want to utilize our esties more because they have that experience in the skin and, the safety of certain tools. And the thing about Nevada too, is you have a lot of services that fall in a gray area. So for example, one thing that I think this subcommittee is going to talk about at some point is we have like a prohibition on, I think it's called salicylic acid, which is in like every item ever in Target anywhere, like in any amount. Yeah. And so if you can't even use that, what does that leave you with? So we pretty much say, well, if you're going to use any of these tools or this acid that falls outside
SD scope of practice, you're now not doing that pursuant to your SD license. You're just doing that pursuant to the fact that you live in Nevada and you want to. So effectively, you can get away from our license and do it essentially with no license at all. And that's the rub here, is everything starts to fall into a gray area. So from my perspective and the calls that I get, it would be great if we can really define what an SD can do and almost abut that right up to what a medical professional can do, so that there's no gray area. And I get calls a lot too. Well, can a doctor supervise me? Well, a doctor doesn't need to, right? Because unlike Utah, we don't have anything that says if you're going to do ABC service, you need a doctor to oversee you. In Nevada, it's you're an SD and you can do it or you can't do it. So there's definitely an appetite for it. And I think that I think the medical board and the nursing board might be kind of glad that we're moving in this direction, because they want to hire our graduates and our licensees. They just don't know what to do with them once they hire them. So I think that they might be pleased that we're trying to work with them. And if you guys want to move in that direction too, for Kai as chair, you know, we could even set up a meeting with the nursing board, the medical board, via Zoom or whatever, and kind of say, hey, here's what we're hoping to do. What do you feel about this? And I've had great interactions with both the medical and the nursing board. So I think they would be glad to sit down and talk with us.
I love that. That was going to be my next conversation. I think that that's something that the subcommittee board needs to do, just to have that conversation. And I think that because here's my goal, bottom line, I'm not looking to tell a board what to do. You get what I'm saying? I'm looking to work with them and to ensure that they're open to, and what they're open to, and why they may not be, because they may have a point of view or a strong safety concern that we may not have ever considered. So I would love to have that conversation. Let's look at some dates on that if possible. If the committee allows that, I will put that up for a motion in a minute to see what they think about that. Also, my question is, I'm excited to hear that they're okay. Honestly, I would like to make it as simple as possible. What are the expectations? What would they like for aesthetic program to do? What would be helpful and supportive of this physician program in that area? And then start adopting what is best solution for that program according to the suggestions of the nursing and the medical board altogether. So right. Absolutely.
Right,
Absolutely.
like reverse engineer it a little bit, right? Like, what do you guys look for in your people you hire, and how can you do that and teach that safely? So that makes sense.
Yes, thank you so much, Leah, because that's the first line right there. I mean, we can hold up the bloodstained banner all day, but we just have to make sure everyone's willing to be on board and communicating accordingly, because there are some years there with knowledge that we need to acknowledge and adopt and make sure that we are growing. And I do want to grow, but grow in a safe manner, and making sure that we're giving all of our SDs and their programs the necessities that they need to be successful. So, okay. I would like to make a motion, if possible.
Madam Chair, I'd like the opportunity to speak before you make a motion. And then
yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, good morning to you. I haven't had a chance to say good morning to everyone. This is Tia Latrell McCormick, and I first want to thank Matt and Adam for those presentations that really did highlight where we are currently in the state of Nevada regarding aesthetics. As the esthetician on the board, there are a few things that I have found extremely concerning when we talk about where we are versus where we need to be. And I think what we need to put at the forefront here is that this is a matter of public safety. We have a growing trend here where aesthetics is outperforming, or not outperforming, but actually the demand for aesthetic licensing is outgrowing cosmetology in a lot of ways. And there's going to be a big demand for aesthetic services. Aaliyah had mentioned that with that, there are new devices and new equipment and all of those things being developed all of the time. I think moving forward, it is very clear that we need 2 licenses. One for estheticians like myself, who originally wanted to get into just facials and eyelash extensions, perming, and that is really the scope that we operate in. But then there are some that want to work in really high-paying jobs that you find in the casinos. And you've got a lot of businesses and a lot of what I consider the bloodlines of Nevada who would take very trained professionals in a heartbeat to expand their businesses. And we're not trained properly to do it, and it's still being done. We don't have the data. The public doesn't have an ability or currently a resource to bring those concerns forward. But this isn't going to go away. It doesn't matter how long we talk about it. It doesn't matter. There is a need right now. And what I wanted to ask Matt is, could you shed some light on your experience in who you've reached out to so far? Because the medical board has been brought up, and this is something that you spent a lot of time speaking with different people in the community. Have you had a chance to speak with the medical board or any other, what would you consider people of importance, as this is like directly affecting them, their business, the ability for us to grow this? Could you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. And everything everybody's saying is spot on. You're all asking the right questions, saying the right things. Yes, we've spoken with the medical board. We've had discussions with their legislative affairs people. We're in touch with some of the physicians that are kind of key members of the board. And there is some interest in this for sure. They don't like seeing this completely unregulated. And I think the eye opener for them, when we talk to the legislative affairs directors, is he's having a hard time even understanding what his board members understand to be the laws around this. So I think confusion and misunderstanding kind of reigns supreme here everywhere at all levels as to who can provide these services, how, under what circumstances, what license is needed, and how they're supervised, under what terms are they supervised. And so, this really is about providing clarity around that and working with the different medical nursing boards. The way Utah did it is they provided a kind of tiers of delegation group A and delegation group C, and you fit into those different delegation categories based on your training. And depending on what category you're in, that dictates supervision. So the higher your credential and training, the lower level of supervision you need for various procedures, and vice versa. And that's how Utah dealt with it. I don't want to get in the weeds on all this. It's but I love talking about it. Like, I nerd out about it. But I feel like, yes, there's a lot of interest in this. We've also spoken with many different members of the legislature. There's a lot of interest, especially because we're talking about consumer safety and jobs, job creation, career creation, higher paying jobs, and especially for women. That's really where we are seeing a ton of interest. And I've seen it in Utah and Washington and Oregon, where we provided classes. Our graduates are 96-7% women, and they are getting high paying jobs and careers. And this license, this advanced license, is the key. It's the key. It's advanced training, and they're getting jobs, stable, high paying jobs. And it's something that is now really kind of feeding on itself, especially in Utah, where we've had the license around for so long, that it really grows the industry. So I don't even think we can sit here and say, well, the industry is only this big, because right now, without the training and the credentialing and licensing around it, but when you have educated and trained graduates finishing and getting these jobs, they educate their employers, their physicians, their spa owners. And you're totally right. There are new technologies weekly. It's just, I'm in the industry, and I'm sometimes surprised at how we're talking about laser energy, light energy, radio frequency, ultrasound. I mean, there's no end. Who wants to put limits on what these technologies can do? And so when you're combining these and you're adding chemicals, there's no end to the number of devices and the types of treatments. And so there's just really no end to the opportunities. And when we have a license where practitioners are trained and understand these technologies because they have the right education, then they're in a position to take advantage of it. And so, yes, we're already having great discussions with the right people. There's a lot of interest in this session. And I've always felt, because this is what I've seen in other states, that it's this board. It's the Board of Cosmetology where we add this license in, and whatever we need to do to make any adjustments. We have an amazing full-time board staff that we've had some great discussions with. They're very competent people. They're professional. The investigators they're seeing these technologies as they go out and investigate. And the issue is, you've got estheticians. Yes, there are a lot of estheticians being hired by physicians and laser centers, and they can perform a facial and be proud to display their esthetician tag, but then they've got to cover it up as they go into another room and start using another device. It just doesn't make sense. It's a dance that practices are doing. And I know this because we're talking to physicians and laser centers and medical spas. It's a really strange dance they have to do. So it's happening out there, yes, but to be able to actually officially license this and credential this is something that just really needs to happen. And this is the right board to address this.
Thank you, Matt. And Adam, could you talk with me a little bit about how they're circumventing doing these services currently? Like, these services are being performed, but could you explain basically how they're going about it? Because there are a lot of estheticians currently doing these services, and basically they found this loophole. And it really is a disservice to the estheticians, their earning power, what they could do if we were properly licensed and acknowledged. And that is kind of a sidebar, but it's still a big issue. We need to be able to regulate this, to get the data from this, to inspect this. So Adam, could you just shed some light on basically how things are being done now and how they're maybe getting around using estheticians, but not necessarily, I guess, acknowledging them in that way, where it's a room and they can zone it separately. They can go in that room and do it, but it's not necessarily monitored by the Nevada State Board of Cosmetology. How will we bridge that gap once we put this license into place?
That's correct. And Leah can speak a little bit more from the compliance side. We do have a law that permits us to license a salon with the exception of one room within a salon. Coming from another state and into Nevada, I found that law was very strange and unique, and a way of bypassing certain health and safety standards and infection control prevention standards that should be followed, because we're not granted access into that area of that salon. It's not licensed. So if that concept would need to be addressed with the only licensing a fraction of the salon and not license a certain room in certain cases. We do have cases where an esthetician will work in one room in the salon and perform a service under the scope of practice of an esthetician. And they'll leave that room that holds their license up on the wall, and they'll walk across the hall into an unlicensed room in the salon. And in that unlicensed room in the salon is where services under a physician's supervision is performed. And that supervision could either be in person, over the phone, by email, or only as needed if there's an issue, if an issue should arise. It does create some complexities when going in and doing inspections, I'm sure, and Leah, I hope, can provide some details, but having that walk across the hall to perform a service would be eliminated, because they would be able to do it under their license. And that's the whole reason why they walk out of that room with their license being posted and into a room that is not licensed by the Nevada State Board of Cosmetology and that does not have an esthetician license posted. we've been trying to figure out where's the consumer protection in that current setup, and it's lacking. Leah, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think Tia Luttrell kind of hit it on the head there. She's like, well, these things are going on. Because can you imagine as being a consumer of a spa service, you get a facial, there you are in your robe listening to your music. Hey, can you switch rooms? Because now I'm not an esthetician. I mean, who is doing that? And so quite frankly, I mean, it's idiotic. And then the challenge that we have is, for example, you say, hi, I'm Tia Luttrell. I want to do, let's say, microdermabrasion with this level of acid that says in your law I can't use it. So what licensing do I need? Well, you can't do it pursuant to your SD license, but if I see you using it, I can't report you to the medical board because they don't regulate you because you're not a medical provider. I can't report you to the nursing board because you're not a nurse. So really, you could make a killing in this gray area of services that are almost more advanced than what your SD license covers. So like there's this whole pocket of super dangerous that everybody is kind of falling into now, right? It's not quite medical and it's a little bit more advanced than basic aesthetics. And I'll call the nursing and I'll call medicine and I'll call pharmacy and they're like, not us, not us, not us. And so I think everybody's trying to say, okay, well, who can fill that gap? And I think Matt touched on it when he said, I think they're looking for us to be the people who do that. And to your point, right, consumer protection is number one here. If we do start licensing and regulating different things, you know, our inspectors are going to get, you know, courses on how these things are supposed to look, how they run, what this service looks like, because we can't just pick it up and know nothing about it. So it's going to take some time, but, you know, I can tell you from a compliance perspective, I'm certainly open to doing it because I hate when people call me and say, what do I need to do this service properly? And my answer is, well, I don't really know. You know, wash your hands.
So thank you for that, Leah, because I think what I want to define now is that it is important for us to, as a subcommittee, the next steps for us would be to push this forward. How and at what point? I mean, because the medical board, and I honestly, I welcome that insight, as do you and as does everyone, but I don't see them wanting to stop a two-tier license. Is that when you're speaking with them, it sounds like there's a need for it and they want to be incorporated into the process. Is that kind of a fair assessment?
I can remember conversations with both the medical board, but particularly nursing, where they're like, we're never going to tell you what your licensees can and can't do because you're not going to tell us what ours can and can't. And so they've been super open to being like, how do we do this together? Who covers this? I think they share the same frustrations we do, right? Like we get complaints, they'll say about, I don't know, some sort of peel. And we'll say, well, that contains an item that we don't regulate. So then we're all sitting there staring at each other going, well, now what do we do? And so I think they'd be glad to hear that we're interested in this. And I think they'd be like, yeah, whatever we can do, you're not stepping on our toes, because we're not telling them what they can't do. And they're not interested in telling us what we can either. And they use the phrase to me a lot, we regulate the people, not the service. So they say, are you an MD? Then you're mine. Then you might be doing something very similar. It's not my business. So they've been pretty gracious about working with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all that information. Like I said before, in order for all of that information to be listed, and we need to know exactly what services that they would like for estheticians to do that is beneficial. Like I have said before, I don't see why they would have a pushback on that conversation. So in order for this license to move forward, we need to have what that scope looks like, as Matt has been very clear about as well. 600 hours is the basic aesthetics. This is why it's important we have to, so that's been my conversation this whole time. We have to have a conversation with medical and nursing on what the expectations that they expect aesthetics to take on. If they say it's okay for X, Y, and Z, that would be great. Please put that under your scope. We don't regulate this. We don't regulate that. What don't you regulate? What is being done that needs to go under those licenses? This all needs to be stated, and not just a list. I would like strongly, I'm sure every aesthetic would like strongly, for a medical or physician board to say, this would be greatly helpful for us, this to go under aesthetics, this to go under aesthetics. We've been looking for this. This needs to be implemented. So there needs to be clarification, and that's what we're requesting when we're asking for this meeting. It is not a delay. It is a clarification to ensure that we're doing it right the first time, to make sure it's implemented properly. So is there another way that would be best to present this to the board without having the substantial information?
I believe what we
To have that list.
Madam Chair, I believe we have the substantial information, which is why we asked for these reports.
Where is that? Where's the list that you say? Because I have a list from Matt.
I don't want to get in the practice of talking over one another, but I do believe that these services for advanced aesthetics, I believe it's like all listed here. So I guess I don't understand, what are you wanting to see if they object to any of the listed services in Adam's presentation, or?
No, in Matt's presentation. So once again, where don't you feel that we don't need the clarification of the list? That's what I'm asking for. Where is the list that you're saying that this is the master's aesthetics? What follows that?
I believe that it was on, and I'll have to go back to Adam, but it's potential services for advanced aesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the, and I didn't have any questions about that whatsoever. And I think that all of those have been existing services listed. I don't think that we expanded that at all, or anything needs to be taken away. So what is it that you want the medical board to do? To come in and say, no, we don't agree with you covering this service? And then,
excuse me, Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, no problem, Ms. Glenn. I was just trying to figure out Ms. McCormick's question. I was so confused. So I didn't want anyone to feel left out or shoved aside or pushed to the left. I think that having clarification, because her point of view is very important to me. And I think that her question is standing on my question. So she needs to understand my question so that we can have clarification. Just really quickly, my clarification was there was a list that was given by Adam as well as Matt. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Is the medical board against that? That's the conversation. And we're not going to know that for those that are listed. We're not going to know that if there isn't a conversation. I don't see why they would have it. I'm sorry, we explained we're not going to talk over each other, right? So,
I did have the floor.
I know, but wait a minute. Let's be clear, McCormick. You just said we're not going to talk over anybody. Right. So I just want to clarify this statement.
That I was having with Leah, which was leading me to the question. So I was getting clarity from Leah, which is compliance, as to why what involvement the medical board, or what say they would really have in the State Board of Cosmetology agreeing to move forward with the development of a two-tier license. Just because we approve the development of a two-tier license doesn't exempt the medical board from the conversation.
Well, that's what what I was just saying. We need to talk to the medical board.
Okay, but
like, we're not saying that estheticians can do Botox without a conversation, correct?
But we are a subcommittee. This would have to still go to the board for consideration. So we're just saying that we're pushing it forward for the board to begin development. And I believe it's at that point that the medical board would be invited into the conversation for us to fine tune the list that we've come up with of services that should be covered under two-tier aesthetics. And at that point, the discussions would happen between the board, the medical board, NEMA, anyone else who wanted to be involved as we fine tune this, getting ready for legislation. I don't believe that the medical board needs to come present to the subcommittee before we agree that there is a need for a two-tier license.
And I get what you're saying.
I'd rather give you back because I don't know that we need that before we as a subcommittee push it forward to the board. That's just.
That totally makes sense, but I like to have full information and not half information when I present it to the board. So if there's already a conversation that have been had and we say, hey, they have already spoken to, Leah has already communicated or operations have already communicated X, Y, and Z. This has been okay. We have already had a conversation with X, Y, and Z as far as the list of services that they think is great for aesthetics to push forward, right? So when we present that to the board and they already have that information, at that point, then the next step can occur. Why would I overstep that bound?
I don't think you have. I think you've heard from Leah today, who said that she's been in direct contact with the medical board, nurses, practitioners, and they see a need for this. They also have expressed, both to her and Matt Brenton and his school, as well as other people within the state board, a need for a regulatory agency to give.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I have a question for Matt, please.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, Ms. McCormick, we'll come back to your statement. I apologize. Go ahead, Ms. Gwen.
Hi, Matt. Gwen Bramo. Let me get my camera. Okay, we are in subcommittee, right? My question to you, when you were on the screen, it was basically you were speaking about, I just want clarity. I want to be just clear, okay? Because I really think that that it looks like we're going to be moving in a good direction. But I think where I have a question, it had advanced and then it also had medical. So are we, the procedures that you have listed, some of the procedures that you had listed that kind of geared over towards the medical side, with that advanced license, with the medical, would a medical esthetician be able to perform the services that, no, work? Okay, would the advanced esthetician be able to perform the services that were listed over on the medical side? Or are we just focusing on the advanced license with the additional hours, I'm sure, whatever that looks like, for that esthetician to be able to offer the advanced services? So are we talking about advanced services or are we talking about medical services?
Excellent question. Do you mind if I share my screen? I can bring up that slide.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, let me do this and make sure I get the right. Okay. Is that the slide, I'm guessing?
Yes, that's the one.
Okay. Yeah, okay, awesome question. So this is, again, we're talking about this advanced license. What most states have done is there's the basic and then there's the advanced or master. It's the same thing.
Okay.
And I'm not aware of any state that has a separate medical esthetician license. What I laid out this slide because I want us to see that the way that we kind of think of it just personally at our school, there's advanced aesthetics and then you have advanced aesthetics with device-based. Mm-hmm. And these are realms where really we are fully, you know, and the board is fully competent and able to regulate and understand. And we're okay. We're not dealing with FDA regulated medical devices. Then there's this threshold you cross over when you get into these devices that are regulated by the FDA. And we're talking about, you know, FDA regulated devices that get into using medical devices to provide aesthetic procedure. And that's where it's sometimes called medical aesthetics. But yes, these other licenses in Washington and Virginia and Washington, DC and Oregon and Utah, all of these are included in the master aesthetic license or the advanced aesthetic license. And on the medical side, that's when we're getting into, this is where so much of the growth is happening. This is where we do have this intersection with the medical world. And yes, I can also say that there really is a lot of times some excitement around the possibility of working together with multiple different boards and providing clarity, because yes, there's a lot of confusion, as has been pointed out by many different people. So yes, that's a really good question. And yes, we feel like that the best way to go is to have these building blocks stack right on top of the basic license, because in the basic curriculum, they're learning about sanitization, they're learning about the skin, the anatomy of the skin, how the skin reacts to different stimuli, And all of those same skills apply whether you're doing a basic facial or whether you're doing waxing or whether you're getting into chemical peels, running a hydrofacial device, doing hair removal. All those same building blocks. It's just getting into the more advanced segment of the business and using different devices. And once an esthetician sets down her facial products and picks up a hair removal device and goes into the medical world, still that same advanced or master esthetician, but then that's where some element of medical supervision or directorship is needed in most states. And that's where this intersection is happening. So that's my long answer to the short question. Yes.
Okay,
I
I have another question for you while we're talking about this. So say we move in, say now we're at the advanced, we're looking at the advanced aesthetic license. Would that person still have to, I think that's probably one of those questions that we would have to ask. Would that person with that advanced aesthetic license still have to work under a medical doctor? Or could they work in their private suite with their door closed or don't have to go to the next room? Because I'm just trying to visualize moving forward to the future, you know, with that license and what it looks like with the estheticians that's already licensed, having to go back to school to get their advanced license. So what that look like? How many hours do you know, so I think you would play a good part in this, but kind of like how many hours, because we just reduced those hours, as Madam Chair stated, to the 600 hours. And it seemed like we could have left them at 900 and added some things there. And then we could have built, because it looks like it's doubling the hours almost. It's like two, three questions in one.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's all related. So yeah, most states again have a 600-hour basic license and then a 600-hour advanced or master license. That's what most states are doing. Oregon has a 750-hour basic, but it's a more advanced basic, and then 450 for their advanced license, but it's a 1,200-hour total. And with a 1,200-hour license, we are not aware of any state where our Utah license does not transfer. And so if Nevada goes to a 1,200-hour license total, that's also a huge draw that students are moving to come to our school from all over the US because they know they'll have great lateral mobility to any state. And so there's, yes, I think getting to 1,200 hours provides a graduate from a Nevada school with a master or advanced license to transfer to Oregon or Washington or Utah, or Virginia, or any of these other states. I think that's the trend we're starting to see. So yes, and on the supervision side, the way Utah's done it is they've really kind of classified kind of how aggressive the device is. And the more aggressive device, they have three categories. There's a non-ablative, the two main categories are non-ablative and ablative. Okay. And estheticians are performing these non-ablative procedures. Once you get into ablative, and it's defined in, you know, through the technology used and kind of the level of disruption and potential risk. Once you get into ablative, the state of Utah has said estheticians cannot use these devices unless the physician is right on site. But on the non-ablative side, Utah, Washington, Oregon, Virginia, they've all said master estheticians or advanced estheticians can use these devices even under general supervision, meaning the doctors, it's 60 miles or 60 minutes away or immediately available by phone, but there has to have been an intake consultation on the front end. And all of these are just these, you know, these discussions we have with the medical professionals, so they're comfortable knowing what the curriculum will be, that our students are learning, knowing what we're doing. Then they say, oh, hey, we'll put you in this you know, class A delegation group because you have a good education in skin and skin anatomy, and we'll put you in this where you need lower supervision. And then all of these are the discussions that happen with the medical professionals around this. But yes, and what's already been said, you know, we get to dictate, you know, as the board, you get to dictate what types of training is included in the license and what types of building blocks are taught. And then,
yeah, I think we all get to dictate that. I think it's something that it's a conversation, but do you agree that it's a conversation that we need to maybe have with the medical board and the nursing board before, so that we can know what, I mean, moving forward, Is that something, I mean, is that a conversation? You said that's a conversation you've had already. So you kind of have an idea of what they're expecting us to be able to service as far as clients and what instruments and tools being able to be utilized?
Not in great detail yet. We've just sort of presented what we're looking for, what we're doing. And I know there's some discussions going on internally on their end, and they want to look and see what other states have done and reach out to other medical boards in other states, which they have done. And so those discussions are happening on the back end, and we haven't gone back and actually sat down at the table and gotten, okay, look, here's specifically what we're proposing. What are you wanting? But that eventually needs to happen. But I think as a board, you all can decide, yes, now's the time for on our end, you know, create, let's go for the second tier. Let's get behind this. Now's the time. This is an opportunity. Let's figure out what we need to do on our end and be confident knowing that we can go sit in front of any other board and look everyone in the eye and say, there's a problem out there. We're part of the solution. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're willing to provide. Here's the credential we want to create. Here's the training we're going to have our schools providing. We are going to be part of the solution.
Wonderful. I have another question for staff. Just a question, maybe it's for Leah and Adam as well. Question, if this move forward today, I could just say maybe Adam, Leah, whoever can answer this question. What does this look like? I know that staff has to be trained and the board has to initially finalize and say, okay, these are the procedures that we would like to have in our advanced license. So, but what does it look like for the schools? Because ultimately, the schools are going to be the ones that's going to have to, if they decide they're going to offer the program, they will have to be able to put this in their curriculum. So what does it look like as a board putting some of these procedures that we know that's being done, that I really believe that some of the procedures, I mean, even, you know, with the microblading and the laser hair removal, some of those procedures I think are really good procedures. And I think estheticians on another level should be able to offer those services if they're trained. But what does it look like in a school? Because I think it's going to be ultimately where it has to begin.
That's a good question, Madam President. Well, this is still a long, multiple steps to get to the place where the schools are implementing the program. I could be miscommunicating here. So Leah or Gary can follow up. If Justin's on the call, he can communicate as well. The first attempt is to get once we get approval for an advanced aesthetics to be created through the Nevada revised statutes, the NRS, that's kind of like our CEO of our law. That's the main thing that we follow. We would then need to go into the rules to draft the specifics, the NAC, to draft the specifics of how the transition of the advanced license would work in the industry. And that would be where the curriculum would be worked out, possibly along with more high level, more specific details to help navigate the schools. So even if we get approval in 2021, I believe that the rules would have to be drafted to communicate how that approval from the NRS would be executed. There would be a discussion. There would definitely be multiple discussions that we would have to have, workshops that would have to be held. That way people would be familiar with not only the added services to the scope, but also the definition of the scope.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have to meet with the estheticians, the schools that offer the advanced programs, and get that material to also provide to any existing esthetician, should they want to increase that training.
Mm-hmm.
There are just several obstacles to get to that point. Also, the grandfathering of individuals, if that would be an option, but I doubt that could be if we're increasing the scope of the service, as well as the discussion of the instructors, which Kai was mentioning. How do we get the next level of instructors? Because esthetician instructors now are trained to teach, are trained to teach the basic part, there needs to be a buffer for the educators to also get to that level. So
Right.
there are multiple steps, and I think that the first step is to see what the appetite is of the board. Do you all want to increase the scope with these services? And after you select those services, it's looking at how do you add those services into a second-tiered scope of practice, into legal terms, and then going from there with meeting with the other parties, medical board or the board, meeting with other stakeholders to get input or to say this, these are how things will operate. And Lee or Gary or if Justin's on the call, they may be able to speak to that or to clarify if I misspoke about the NRS and NAC and the time gap.
Adam, just quickly, I wanted to take a moment while you were talking about the process and that there is quite a process of involvement and many people to drag into this conversation. I'd like to remind my fellow committee members that we did get approval. You guys did approve a town hall that is specific to two-tier licensing for aesthetics, which again takes us further down the road. As Gary said, somewhere January, February, we'll be having this conversation with estheticians, officials. I believe that so many people are going to come to the table to bring their concerns, and this is a key component of why I push so hard for this town hall, for transparency, for the ability for estheticians to really speak about their careers and the scope of licensing and how it will impact them, but also to get that insight from the medical board. They're more than welcome to be members on my panel, and I look forward to a really well-rounded discussion happening and taking place regarding this issue. Sorry, Adam, I just wanted to take a moment to put that in.
No, that's okay. I want to hear from Gary, please.
And one of the things we need to do is, as we move forward, we need to work with the board staff of nursing and the board staff of the medical association, because that's where they have qualified people that are looking at this stuff. The medical board has 14 or 15 attorneys on staff. They will look at everything we're proposing and analyze it, making sure that it all fits and matches with what they're looking for. And so as we go to the board staffs, we will take and present everything that we know. We'll put everything that we can think of on the table and discuss with them. Then they're going to come back to us and say, we like this, this, and this. We don't think there's going to be a way we can approve this because we have, some stipulation in their rules. But what it will allow, it'll allow them to start thinking in terms of, because their doctors are utilizing estheticians, but the estheticians are falling short in their training, here's a way to get all that you need from an esthetician, everything that you wanted for the advanced with instruments, and for the medical esthetician to have all that training done before they arrive at your office. So I think we would always offer two licenses, a basic esthetician license, an advanced or master esthetician license. The advanced esthetician license would be 600 hours or more. And we have to analyze just what needs to be taught in those. I think we've got some good examples from Utah, who's been doing it for many, many years. We could use that as a basis to start with and see if we want to add anything. If they've covered everything that needs to be done, that's what we'll go with and we'll move forward with it. But I think it really is, we need to get to the board staff quickly to have them incorporate this into their thought process. Because if they don't if that doesn't get incorporated into their thought process, we bring it to the board, the medical board and the nursing board, they will speak against it. We have to involve them in some way so that we can get them on board with it.
That part.
Right. Thank you, Director Landry. That was a concern of mine, because no matter, at the end of the day, we can approve moving forward, we can approve licenses, but the schools have to teach it. So I just want to be clear on that. And the presentation was awesome. I'm just a member, so I'm not on the committee, on this committee. I probably should have been on this committee, but I see it going in a positive direction. Thank you, Director Landry.
Okay, hello, good morning. This is Board Member Harris. I have a few questions myself. And
Yes, Ms. Harris, we acknowledge you. Go ahead.
Thank you. And I appreciate everything everyone has said. It answered a lot of my questions, but I would like to know maybe from Matt, because he is in Utah and it's his program. and everything sounds great, and it's for the public and safety. It's for the safety and health of the public. So, and she talked about President Nguyen talked about where it's going to be taught. That was one of my questions. So I would just like to know, when you say grandfather in, if you have less than the 1,200 hours, because a regular esthetician is required with 600. How are they going to be grandfathered in? And who is going to teach the program? Is your program taught at a private institute? Are there people with extensive education and knowledge aside from the beauty school? We're just doing, basic aesthetic stuff. And yeah, but I definitely think it adds value to the state, and I think it sounds great, and we should go forward. But I would like to know who actually is going to be teaching the program that's in your state in Utah, Mr. Matt.
Yeah, great question. So we are fortunate to have trained master esthetician instructors in Utah that we can leverage, and now they're in Washington and Oregon and surrounding states. And maybe there's a pathway that the state of Nevada can provide to existing instructors, some sort of a grandfathering instructor course. But grandfathering is always a big topic, right? With a lot of passion around it for existing licensees. There are no doubt many Nevada estheticians who have been in the practice and running these types of devices. They work for physicians and dermatologists and in medical centers or medical spas. And it's possible they could be fully competent and able to do these types of procedures. And so sometimes the grandfathering pathway can be proof of number of services provided or some type of credentialing that way. The state of Washington provided a specific grandfathering course that was shorter than a full 600-hour course if a practitioner had shown some practice in the field. And I can't remember the details on it, but I believe it's like a 2 or 3 week course that allowed existing esthetician licensees to come and achieve that higher level license in a shorter course, kind of recognizing that they have been out practicing and working in the field for a time. So that's an option. I just kind of know what other states have done. I know there'll probably be a lot of discussion around what it will look like in Nevada. In terms of the content, there's a lot of really good content now for master advanced aesthetics. Milady is a very popular content provider, and they have some excellent advanced book and materials, online materials. So that's why this is kind of a good time to do this, is there really is a lot of content out there for, whether it's for individual practitioners, for schools, for instructors, to get up to speed. And I hope that's not going to intimidate anybody, that we can't step into this world because we don't already have the existing information available, but because it is available for sure.
Oh, okay, well, that's great. Could you tell me your acronym again for your NIMA?
Yeah, National Institute of Modern Aesthetics.
Oh, Modern Aesthetics. Okay, fantastic. Well, I think the 2-tier is great. I think we should welcome this in Nevada. It sounds like a great program. So thank you, board members, committee members.
And board, especially board chair Stanton, I think we're probably all at this point liking the idea, right, of moving forward. We're just trying to figure out how. I think probably one of the main things we should do before we start, hustling our wares to the nursing and medical board might be to also figure out specifically what we're going to want to regulate and what we're going to want to cover. So Matt had just mentioned, I think it's a great point, that like Milady offers these resources. We know the questions we've been asked, and that other states, kind of already have a little bit of a framework for us. So maybe even at an upcoming meeting, we can kind of prioritize, okay, like what are we trying to take on? That way, when we do have this sit down, we can say, okay, here's this gray area. Here's how we think we can fill it. And we kind of have like a framework for us, which I think was what Kai and Tia Latrell were kind of going back and forth about. Because speaking for myself, I know a lot of the questions I'm asked. I don't know what a lot of these implements are or how you use them. And I think the medical board might wonder that a little bit too when we do talk to them, like, okay, here's, a plasma pen. What does that mean? What does that have in it? How does that work? And we kind of start to set up framework from that point. If anybody has any thoughts on that.
That's perfect. I think that's the overall conversation. And I think that's where things get lost in the shuffle a little bit. So I do apologize if the conversation becomes a little passionate. We're all very passionate about our careers, and we all are excited about the investment that's happening. So we want to make sure that it's done right and kind of rock solid as we move forward, because this is unfamiliar territory, and a lot of ways on how to execute this will be considered. But the best way is to, number one, let's just start here. I think the best step, Leah, is what you said, and what Gary was saying is just making sure we have clarification on what medical board or nursing or however that looks is comfortable with, and let's just move forward with the process. I'm okay with that. I don't want to present uninformed or half information on us presenting something that is completely out the scope of what they would approve on. So I guess what I'm saying is I would like to make a motion, but I'm trying to figure out what would that look like? What motion am I making in order for us to move forward with this right now for the best step that I can communicate to the board on? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think one of the things as committee chair, you and Gary really work together to create the upcoming agendas. So even if we kind of leave this where it is for now, and then we kind of give you a draft of the next agenda, and we can start to kind of build that with you kind of on the sideline, we're fine to do that. If you feel like a motion's necessary, I think you could just motion to move forward with tiered licensing, and additional information will be on the next agenda.
Okay. Is there any other board members that can, on the committee, that can, and because you are the esthetician on the board, McCormick, I would like to lean on you regarding what do you think is the best step, besides we would like to add on some information to that before we present it.
Right, and hi, yeah, I'm sorry. So yeah, I agree with you. I think we're just so passionate about this, and I know that we're all on the same page with wanting to see progress in our state regardless, and public safety be acknowledged every step of the way. I think that we should approve moving forward with 2-tier licensing, and I think that what Leah said is true, that you should work with Executive Director Landry to make sure that the proper things are put on those agendas so that we are able to address every concern, question, implement anything that needs to happen as far as the conversation that's taking place as we define exactly what that's going to mean for the state of Nevada.
Now, we do have a list of services that were already on there. I would like for, if possible, because you're an esthetician, I would like for those, because you do these services regularly, that is not under a certain level, maybe it's like a steamer or something that is a brand new and we need to use it. I would not know that. I need to have that listed and sent to Gary so that when we're going over these things, it's not just, and I'm not saying the information that I have is incorrect or anything's wrong with it. Right. I'm just saying that I would like extensive incorporation to make sure when we present this, it's all together and I don't have something else floating out there that, oh, we didn't add this on there.
Well, and
now we have to go back and we represent the same thing to add it. Mm-hmm.
There are some things.
Okay, so if you could send.
Even under my scope, there are some things here that I've never done. So even on this list as an esthetician, there are things that I just have never even touched with my own hands. So I am 100% with you that we need to really define this and what it means. So yes, I'm happy to be involved in that process and to submit whatever to you or whomever as far as my experience. But I definitely, I saw, there are a couple things on this list that I know we're gonna have very big discussions about. So definitely.
Are you okay with that, Gary?
Yes,
Having
I'm
the list sent, okay. to
I'm
you?
fine with that. The only thing I want to say is that for us to move forward as a board, you would have to make a motion to bring this before the board here to the January meeting. I think most of the board members are here today, so it's not going to be a surprise to them. But that way we could say, the board can tell the board staff, move forward with this and start contacting the medical board, nursing board when you have all this outlined. And we can work with Matt and get all the information we can get from him, get anything we can get from Oregon, Washington State, all the ones that have different licensing, incorporate it all into this new license, figure out what we do want to keep in, what we want to take out, then meet with the medical and nursing boards and find, not the nursing board and medical board, nursing board staff, medical board staff, get their approval of it. Then we can all move together, because then they'll approve it. They'll bring it before their board to approve. Then we can move forward. Because if the board staff, like I said, the board staff does not want it, wants to fight it, it will not be an easy task for us to get past them. So let's get the board staff on board. They'll get the medical board and the nursing board on with it. Then we have support going into the legislature. And we'd love to work with Matt on that also, as he has some people that he's worked with, working with the medical board and the nursing board, and trying to get as much as we can get from him on getting all of this approved. That's the thing we want to do. Whatever the board wants to do, we want to do also. We want to get it approved. If the board wants to move forward with it, we want to move forward. But the way to move forward with it is bring it before the board approves it, and then we move forward from that.
Okay.
Thank you, Gary. That's actually what I wanted to say, is that we have to essentially vote it out of committee to get the entire board on board. So, I mean, I'm completely on board with moving forward.
That said, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to, if it's okay with whatever's in line with that, I think would be the proper motion at this time.
Will this be an advanced license, or are we stating a master? Just so we know what the motion is.
Two-tier licensing, I think, is where we are.
Two-tier.
Yes.
I agree. I don't think we should get stuck on nomenclature and just refer to it as a two-tier.
And the term master or advanced can be determined by the board. Whatever the board wants, if they want to leave it open for now, and we'll work with the medical community and the nursing community, find out what they're comfortable with, we can do that also. Whatever the full board wants, that's what I would let that term be determined by the full board.
Perfect. I think we're ready to make a motion. Is that okay? Ms. McCormick, I'd like to push that forward, please.
I'd like to make a motion to approve two-tier licensing.
May I please have a second?
Brian Baltazar, I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, and the ayes, oh, any nays? And the ayes have it. Thank you so much. That was a strong conversation.
Sorry, this is because Justin's not here, and you know how much he likes to interrupt and ask for clarity. Just for purposes of clarity, when you say approve, you're approving this to go before the full board to get their blessing on moving forward.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
No worries. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next.
And I think we went a little bit rogue, Board Chair Stanton. I think we're on D4 right now, the selection of future law review dates.
Yes. Pulling up. Went to sleep on me. Sorry. So engrossed in that.
Excuse me. I think you have to either review or make a motion or dismiss number 3 the subcommittee research on the Utah government. I think that was covered in Matt's presentation, so it's not really necessary to go through it, but you need to either discard it or make a motion to discard it.
I like to make a motion to discard. Did we already go over that following information? My other computer just shut down. I apologize. My agenda went blank.
Madam Chair, we did. It was covered under Mr. Britton's presentation mostly, so just making a motion to discard it is sufficient.
I apologize. It's coming back up. I'd like to make a motion to discard. Following next topic, please. Now the second.
Yeah. I second that.
Thank you. Coming back,
so then everyone, in terms of dates, we have a regularly scheduled full board meeting on January 11th.
Wait, excuse me. You have to call for the vote. You had a motion in a second. Now call for a vote to see the ayes and nays carry.
May I please have a vote for?
Excuse me, real quick. This board member Harris, what are we discarding?
Number 3, the Utah Tier 2. We've already researched that information regarding Mr. Britton already went over that in his presentation information.
Right. Oh, okay.
So we're just moving forward in that.
Great.
And my computer shut down, my second one, so I was trying to pull that up. So I apologize for the delay.
Me too.
So may I please have a vote for nays?
Okay, I think you've got to vote on the.
Sorry.
Yep, you're just good. Your line now is all in favor.
Okay, all in favor. I'm sorry.
Any line too.
Does any opposed? Great. Okay, moving forward. On the next agenda, at E, were you wanting to say something, Leah, before I call for agenda E?
Yeah, so number 4 there, selection of future law review subcommittee dates. So the 11th is going to be the regularly scheduled board meeting where we can have the board vote on moving forward with the 2-tier licensing. And I believe we might have off on the 18th because it's MLK Day. Did you guys want to shoot for maybe the 25th for a subcommittee meeting? It's a Monday. We could do 9 a.m. again.
December 25th?
January.
Oh, January.
Yep. Yes, Roxanne, if you wouldn't mind Christmas Day, just.
Right. No. Thank you. That's what I was thinking. Wait a minute, what?
No, sorry.
January 25th at 9 a.m.
If that works for you guys.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that okay, board members? January 25th at 9 a.m.
Yes. Board member
Yes.
Yay.
Aye.
Do I need to make a motion for that?
I would do a motion for that one, yes.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion for January 25th at 9 a.m. to have the next subcommittee meeting. May I please have a second?
This is Board Member McCormick. I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Perfect. The ayes have it. The next subcommittee will be January 25th at 9 a.m. On the next agenda, we have comments from the general public. Comments from the general public. Please keep them to a minimum if possible. No comments? Any comments from?
I think I want to make a comment, Gwen
Yes.
Bremo. I am happy that, well, say I'm excited that you guys voted on us moving forward. And I know we all have a lot of passion about what we believe in and the direction we would like to see our state go in. So I think today was a good meeting. I mean, you know, there was we can always agree to disagree, but at the end of the day, we're moving forward with the best interest of our state and the licensees involved. Thank you.
Is there any other comments from the public? Thank you. Any other comments from board? Any comments from board? Any comments from staff? Okay, I would like to call this meeting be adjourned. I'd like to make a motion for this meeting to be adjourned. Do I make a motion for that?
You do, and you can make it too, Kai. So if the motion's on the table, she just needs a second.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion for this meeting adjourned. May I please have a second?
Brian Baltazar, wow, I forgot my name. Brian Baltazar, I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You all have a wonderful holiday. Be safe.
Okay.
Thank you.
One thing I want to mention, don't forget, we have a board meeting at 2:30 today. So at 2:30, we're going to come back on the Zoom meeting for a quick board meeting with only one agenda item. That's continuing the distance education for the schools.
Oh, yes, yes. Please, see you all at 2:30.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, Matt, for your presentation.
Thank you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Matt.